Yesterday evening, there were some questions about separation. Separation and oneness. To me, separation and oneness does not mean the destruction of the separateness. The separateness, just noticing that there is separateness as part of phenomenality is enough. For instance, let me supposing a friend of mine takes 10 photographs of himself in 10 different costumes and with appropriate makeup. He shows me the 10 photographs. I would say they are different. They are different people. But if he tells me that it is he who has taken the photographs of himself in 10 different costumes, then for me, because of that information, because of that knowledge, the separateness disappears. But the separateness is still there in the photographs. The separateness in the photographs remains. But it is the understanding that it is the same one who has taken 10 different costumes gives me the knowledge, the oneness behind those 10 photographs. The separateness in the 10 photographs remains. But the oneness is merely the knowing that they are not separate. So oneness does not mean that your separateness has to go. So there's a misconception that an enlightened being, which itself is a misconception, is always in oneness with the One. And there is a lot of misconception about that. And the questions usually, which I find, have the basis. Ultimately, this is what is happening. A lot of things are described. This is what happens to me. These feelings come. This is what happens. But basically, the question always is, what do I do? That's what it boils down to. Experiences are described. Feelings which arise are described. Circumstances are described. But the basis of all that boils down to, how do I tackle it? How do I tackle the situation? Meaning, what do I do? And the answer is ridiculously simple. You do exactly what you are supposed to do, or you decide to do what you are supposed to decide to do. What happens, you just don't know. Therefore, there is really no point in worrying. If you are programmed to take some time over your decision, you will take time over your decision. Take time over your decision. But if you are programmed to make a decision quickly, that's what you will do. My younger son, he's always been, ever since he was a child, he's been programmed to think of the situation. And if there is a problem, face it. And the first thing that happened was, I remember distinctly, he was only about 2.5 years old, 3 years old. And we had something at home, I forget what. So he went to get another like that. And he came back without it. So he said, there was a problem. There were two. One was more expensive than the other. I didn't know which one to buy. So I said, how expensive was the other? So he said, not much. Then why didn't you bring at least one, whichever? Now you have come back with nothing. So in other words, what I impressed upon him quite unwittingly, that was not my purpose at all, was if a decision has to be made, make the decision. It could be wrong. There was an American vice president of a big motor hire company. Avis, I think, was the number one. This was number two. And he was the vice president of that. And he wrote a beautiful book, tiny book, each point on one page, tiny book, but it became a bestseller. And he said, he arose only from one point of view. If he has to make a decision, he makes the decision. But where he is more successful than others is that the ego doesn't come into the picture. If it turns out that the decision was wrong, I correct it as quickly as possible, irrespective of what it does to my image. So the point is to make a decision. And that dawned on him, my son. So when I told him that, he gave me such a peculiar look. He gave me a long look. He was 2.5, 3 years old. He gave me a long look. He said, yes, why didn't I think of it? That kind of a look. And after that, his nature has always been first to locate the problem, and if there is a problem, to make a decision. He was 3.5 years old when we took a vacation. And our vacation was to Bangalore. So at that time, there was no direct train, and flying at my level of income then was out of question. So we had to go by train. And the train stopped at a junction called Hubli for 4 hours. It suited us very well because I had an uncle there who was nearly blind, and we all wanted to see him. So we went there at 10 in the morning, and we went to his place. And at my uncle's place, there was his wife and some other relation of hers, sister or aunt or somebody. Anyway, there were 2 ladies in the house. And Shivdas, my son, 3.5 years old, liked to be rocked, as some babies do. You know, they take him on the lap and rock him. And he loved it. And knowing that he loved it, almost every woman or they used to, and he was a lovely baby, child. So they would rock him. So all the 4 hours, there he was being rocked, apart from the time when he was eating, or the 2 of them would rock him alternately. Then at about 3:30, we went to the train, got into the new train, settled down there. And then one of the ladies asked Shivdas, now you're going. Whom will we rock? And suddenly, there was problem, yes. He recognized, yes, it is a problem. And then suddenly came the answer. And he said, you rock her and you rock her. Problem solved. You see? So, but if you are programmed not to have a And incidentally now, subsequently he became the managing director of a French pharmaceutical company, Roce. And then that company merged with another company. And my Shivadas didn't agree with that merger. So he had the courage to oppose the merger. And when the decision was to have the merger, he made his decision and left the job within 1 week. He emptied his office in 1 week. His wife was in a panic. But I wasn't. But nonetheless, from that day, I decided to give a certain amount every month to the wife so that she should not be in panic. But it so turned out that he is now a consultant, and his card reads, Consultant, Managerial Efficiency, which really means taking decisions. And he is doing very well. So that is part of Shivadas. But what I'm saying is, if you have to make a decision, make a decision. If you take time, take time. But what happens is, that is turned into a problem. My friend makes decisions easily, I don't. Sometimes I'm not able to make a decision at all. All right, toss a coin. But some decision will happen. Now, about decision, most important thing about the decision is to be able to accept that that decision may not turn out to be the right decision. So what happens after you take the decision is never in your control anyway. Something different, and quite often something different happens. There's a story of a gentleman, a professor, who was invited to give a talk at a nudist colony. So he went and reported at 6:30. He said the talk was at 7. So he rang the bell, and a nude woman came and welcomed him and took him to his room. And she said, well, 25 minutes, the talk begins. You come down to the lecture hall and we'll have the talk. So this man closed the door and said, now, these are nudists. I'm the only one dressed. So how do I go down, dressed or undressed? You see, do I go dressed or do I go undressed? So he took courage in both hands, decided to take his clothes off. So he took his clothes off and went down the stairs, stood at the door for a minute, knocked on the door, opened the door, and there they were, all dressed in his honor. So what happens is never, never, ever really in your control. So the second point I would like to talk about this morning is enlightenment. A lot of questions also come. I really don't know why people are concerned whether someone is enlightened or not. But they are. So I'm often asked, am I able to recognize a man who is enlightened? So I said, look, no man is ever enlightened. But if you mean, do I know, am I able to know where the total understanding, as I prefer to call it, has happened in a certain case or not? So I said, I may have a feeling, but I cannot say that the full understanding has happened in this case. But I can say full understanding has not happened in a particular case. That is easy. How do I know that understanding has not happened in a particular case? That is because in that case, that person is too anxious for the world to know that he or she is enlightened. This anxiety to be recognized by the world as an enlightened being is the clearest proof that there has been no enlightenment. If there is enlightenment, if there is self-realization, it is accepted as a matter of course. Because nothing changes. His life continues. But this anxiety to be known, recognized, is the surest giveaway. And in the same context, because of this misconception of someone being enlightened, his behavior is always critically examined. Now the basis of that is the misconception that the enlightened person or the self-realized man is a sort of clone who must have a certain idea of behavior. That is the biggest misconception, because behavior would be based on the programming. And whether the enlightenment happens or not, the programming continues more or less the same way. I'm not saying it cannot and will not be changed, but by and large the programming will remain. That is misunderstood. In Santa Monica, some 5, 6, 7 years ago, Heiner and I went to Heiner's friend for dinner. At that time, there were 2 other guests who were not expected. And they were friends of our host who had come that day. They were either on their own or working for a firm. They were carriers. They brought things in a truck. And then I was told that one man was in a particular ashram, rather a well-known ashram, near Bombay, for many years, and that he was quite high up in the hierarchy. Then he suddenly gave up, totally cut off all connection, and never mentioned the ashram again. So, Heiner's friend, Peter, told him to tell us what had happened. And his story was this. He was high up in the hierarchy, high enough to be able to go anywhere, open any door, go in and do his work and come out. He was high. So once one evening, when he went in, opened the door and went in, he found the Swami in embarrassing situation with a young man. You see. And he was so shocked, he pulled the door shut and decided to leave the ashram in the next 10 minutes. And he did so. He was nearly on his way out. Then he thought, it is, as a matter of courtesy, he should tell the Swami why he is leaving. So he went back, told the Swami, I'm leaving. And the Swami said, all right. And he only added, you created the problem, you solve it. The Swami told this man, you created the problem, you solve it. That's all he said. So, the main misconception arises if you think in terms of an enlightened person doing something. And therefore, the misconception is that an enlightened person is a perfect human being, which it isn't. That's not so. You can find an enlightened person using the word in the correct sense. Totally different personalities. One outgoing, one exactly the opposite. So the personalities reflects the programming. And the behavior reflects the programming. So you cannot really say, so-and-so behaves like this, therefore he cannot be an enlightened being. The story is told of Ramana Maharshi. He liked music. He liked spiritual music. He liked bhajans. So when bhajans were sung every evening as a matter of course, he used to keep time to the music. He used to keep. Then one day, a poet, wrote a music on the greatness of Ramana himself. So they put it to music and they started singing it along with the other music, other bhajans. And Ramana Maharshi continued to keep time to that music which was in praise of himself. And there were whispers. Ramana Maharshi is keep enjoying music in his own praise. So, if you consider that someone is enlightened or not enlightened because of his behavior, you could be wrong. So, now, on the talk yesterday, any questions?
It seemed to that thought itself is simply a manifestation, a reflection. Thought itself,
yes,
is the reflection of the Tao or the source.
Yes.
And the way that it was being discussed for a few moments seemed that the thought itself creates the separation, which I don't think is so. The thought is no different than any other manifestation.
That is correct.
Just as perfect as any other manifestation.
That is correct.
So I'm wondering how I got the impression, which often is put forth, that thought itself is the way we become isolated, the way we attach to the thought, rather than the thought. The thought is, I think that this is an important thing for me personally to see, that the thought is just as much reflection as any other manifestation. But how do we get this impression that thought creates the separation?
Yes. The reason is a matter of semantics. The reason is a matter of semantics. Thought, the difference, the semantics, what causes this confusion is the difference between a thought and thinking. A thought leads to the involvement of thinking. A thought arises vertically. You never know what thought is going to arise next. Therefore, you're quite right. Any thought arising in any body-mind organism is a manifestation of the source. The brain reacts to that thought and leads to horizontal thinking, which is involvement. And it is that horizontal thinking in time as totally different from the vertical arising of the thought. The arising of the thought is in the present moment. The reaction to that thought by the mind, intellect, brain, to that thought, leading to horizontal thinking, is the cause of separation. A thought is not the cause of separation. The horizontal thinking is. But this distinction is not clearly understood, thought and thinking. That's why I said it's a matter of semantics.
A usual idea is that one can let go, quote unquote, of the thoughts.
Yes.
And I think this is also some kind of semantic confusion, because one doesn't really have to let go of anything. If you can, I think what you're saying is if you simply, or if you recognize the thought as thought, just let it be. In itself, it will go away.
That is correct. And that does not lead to separation. But the more important point is whether to let go of that thought, or in other words, merely witness it, or observe it, and the observer getting into involvement, not in your control. That is the more important point. You see? Otherwise you say, it's very simple. All I have to do is witness it, and I'm not in trouble. Not so.
Yeah, but but also it's been my personal experience that when you can remember the source as you get involved, then somehow that makes a difference, does it?
It does indeed. It does indeed. Only way is, you said, when you remember the source. When you remember the source. That is not what happens. If you remember the source, you cut off the involvement. That's the implication. But you cannot remember the source because it is not in your control to remember the source. So, when the source is remembered, because of the understanding at any level, the understanding at any level, even at the lowest intellectual level, inaction is remembering the source. Understanding in action means remembering the source. And if the understanding is at a very early level, then in a scale of 0 to 10, involvement may go right up to 8, 9, and then the understanding comes into action. The source is remembered, as you say, and the involvement gets cut off. So the involvement may get cut off at 9, and as the understanding deepens, the understanding comes into action quicker, and the involvement gets cut off at 9, 8, 7, 6, until the arising of the involvement and the understanding going into action is so simultaneous that is practically, it arises and gets cut off.
Now, Buddhists teach that one way or a good way to remember the understanding is to practice. That is, the practice is the remembering. So in this Advaita teaching, how do you remember? I mean, what is the way you remember or understand or remember your understanding?
I just told you, not in your control. What kind of practice is recommended, I have no idea. But it will still be the you who gets involved doing the practice. You see? So whether the understanding happens even at the intellectual, how does the understanding happen at the intellectual level? The very first time you hear it, you see, the mind intellect says, this seems logical, but I can't accept it. But the fact that it is logical and appeals to you has brought about a certain intellectual understanding. On the other hand, I have seen cases, the very first time, in one, because that body-mind organism was programmed to be demonstrative. Another body-mind organism may not be programmed to be so demonstrative. But in both cases, the understanding could happen straight away. Not the total, I'm not talking of total understanding, but a certain depth of understanding can happen the first time. And in one case, some such demonstrative person, you see, stood up, joined his palms, came right down, fell at my feet, didn't say a word, got up and went and sat back in his seat. You see? So, that acceptance produced this demonstrative action. For him it didn't matter whether it was embarrassing or not. But someone else who is more programmed differently will say, would have said, that is what I wanted to do. But I was too embarrassed to do it. You see? So, what impact, what words will produce, you can never know. That depends, again, basically, on God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. So, I cannot accept that you can practice whatever kind of practice and be able to remember the source.
Thank you.
But I repeat Ramana Maharshi's words, your head is already in the tiger's mouth. Why bother about it? Enjoy life as it happens. And let the tiger and God do their jobs. That's the whole trouble. We don't let God do His job. That is the whole problem. That's why I say, so people say, all right, if I leave everything to God, what do I do? Enjoy life. And when I say enjoy life as it happens, including the happiness and the unhappiness.
It's always said that we should. Here I am.
Ah, yes. That's good. Please raise it, then I know. Yes, please.
It's always said to go deeper and deeper and to find the root of whatever it is, for instance, to find the root of guilt and then pull out the root. And I don't know how to do that.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I've always read to go deeper and deeper if something arises, like
Something arises.
guilt, for instance.
I'm sorry?
A feeling of guilt. Guilt?
Guilt arises.
Guilt arises.
Yes.
Oh, yes, of course.
And what do I do?
Guilt
How do I go
arises.
deeper and how do I find the root or the source
Yes.
of it?
So, why does guilt arise? Because the me says, I should have acted differently. Isn't it? Why does the guilt arise? The guilt arises because the me says, I should have acted differently. And then this consequence which makes me feel guilty would not have been there. That's what it is, isn't it? So now, if by hearing the words and being reminded of the four most important words, thy will be done, if being reminded of those four words brings about some kind of understanding, then that some kind of understanding at any level, you see, will bring about the basic fact that you are incapable of doing anything. To remind you again of Buddha's words, events happen, deeds are done, there is no individual doer thereof. So at some time, again, if it is God's will and the destiny of this body, mind, organisms, thy will be done, those four words will be remembered. And the remembering of those four words will drive the guilt away. But you cannot prevent the arising of the guilt. The arising of the guilt is because of involvement, of the me thinking, I should not have done what I did. Then the understanding comes into action and says, you couldn't have done anything. Then the guilt evaporates. I repeat, therefore, the arising of the guilt cannot be prevented. I mean, you have no control over the arising of the guilt. So let the guilt arise. And as this understanding goes deeper, the feeling of guilt will be cut off quicker and quicker.
Ramesh, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Ramesh?
Yes.
Oh, good. This morning, I feel that we're getting down to brass tacks. This morning,
Yes.
when you're talking about remembering,
Yes.
because this has been on my mind since the talks yesterday.
Yes.
Is about remembering,
Yes.
and I felt that that was somehow the key, because I know that I don't remember.
Yes.
And yet somehow there's a part of me that feels it has to make some kind of effort to remember. And you sit there, right, and you say these things, and I'm somehow, I have to say, looking for some proof, right? Now, the part of me that wants to remember, that can't remember, wants to remember. I'll spit it out in a moment, don't worry.
Take your time coming to the question.
Thank you.
I'm in no hurry.
Oh, good. So, I need to know that you can hear me and that I'm holding this microphone at the right distance.
Absolutely.
Good.
Perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
No, I really feel that we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. And I feel that there is a possibility that of something. And that, so it's a matter of me coming to a place where I don't have to think that oh, hold on. I feel that I have to make some effort, okay? Yet you sit there and you say to me, you don't have to do anything, it's all in your programming. Now, what kind of proof can you give me that it is in my programming, that I don't have to do anything?
How can I assure you? Is that what you're saying?
That's a better word, yes.
How can I assure you?
Yes, how
that
can you give me proof?
No, forget the truth.
No proof.
Proof. Yes.
Evidence.
In other words, what you are saying is, how can I assure you
Yeah,
that things happening are not in your control? Is that the question?
absolutely.
Then the absolutely simple answer is, you have the proof. I don't have to give you the proof. You have the proof from your own personal experience all your life. You have the proof. I don't need to give you any proof.
I don't get it.
I'm sorry?
I don't get that I have the proof.
Oh, yes. I mean,
You've got to give me the proof.
no. Wait a minute. You see, if I give you the proof, you won't accept it.
How do you know I won't?
You will accept the proof only if it happens from your personal experience. And what I'm telling you is, from your personal experience all your life, you have to come to the conclusion that you have not really been in control of your life. So some of your decisions have turned out right, many of them have gone wrong. What you want sometimes happened. What you didn't want has happened more times.
True.
That is your own life, your own personal experience. No proof can be ever stronger than your own personal experience. And what I'm telling you is, from your own personal experience, you have found out, you know that things are not truly in your control, because you make some decisions, they turn out all right.
Yeah.
Most of them are not all right. You want something, you get it. More often than not, what you want, you don't get, and what you don't want, you get.
That's true.
That is your personal experience.
Yeah, but you're telling me that I'm not who I thought I have been all these years that I've been on the earth, right? And
No, not
no?
right.
Aren't you?
No.
Okay,
I'm not telling you that you have not been on the earth all these years. Of course you have been on the earth all these
Yeah,
years.
but you're telling me, you see, I thought I was somebody else when I came here, and I find out that I'm not.
You see, Heiner talked to you about the passport. Any time you have doubt, pick up the passport and see whether you are the same person or are you not the same person. You will never be a different person.
No, I'm thinking
Yes,
that I am I,
yes.
and you're saying that I'm not I am an illusion.
Yes, but that is the subsequent part is, that is what you have to find out from your personal experience. You think you are I, as a me, as the doer who is in control of your life.
That's right.
So what I'm telling you is, from personal experience, now on, every day, at the end of the day, take some time off if you can, and find out, analyze, investigate any number of actions that you can select. Find out for yourself how much control you had over what you called your action at any stage of the action. Or did the action happen because of circumstances beyond your control? Something happened which led to something else, and I dare say you will come to the conclusion, day after day, that what you thought were your actions were truly not your actions. They happened. And that is the personal experience which convinces you that there is truly no me who can do anything or consider herself in charge of her life. That can only happen by investigating any actions during the day, every day, and coming to the conclusion that no action which you thought was your action was indeed truly your action. It was an event which happened. It was a deed that was done. Not because truly you wanted it done, but because it had to happen. In other words, you will come to the conclusion that an action happened because it was the will of God and the destiny of this body, mind, organism, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. And that you as an individual entity, as the individual doer, had truly no control over it. And when that experience happens day after day, then this feeling that I am in charge of my life will, I presume, gradually get weaker and weaker. And then what will happen is that you will begin to accept life as it happens, rather than wanting life to be as you want it to happen. I repeat, then when you truly come to the conclusion from personal experience, I repeat, from personal experience, that no action has really been your action, that you begin to accept that life just happens. Life just happens through every human being. That no human being lives his or her life. Life is being lived through every human being.
So I don't have any say at all in it.
I'm sorry?
I don't have any say at all.
You mean you have no control at any stage?
Yeah,
That is
I'm
correct.
saying to you that's the deal.
That is the concept which I have. The concept which for you can be the truth only from personal experience by investigating as many actions as you can.
So I have to look at
Investigate, yes?
investigate.
Yes.
That means-
Analyze, investigate your actions and find out whether they were truly your actions or they just happened.
Well, I'll let you know how I get on.
You can let me know, but please don't expect an affirmation.
Okay.
I wish you luck. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I remembered something you said yesterday which wasn't exactly clear to me, which was you were talking about the possibility of pleasure arising but no pride.
That's right.
Yeah, that was clear.
That
But-
was clear.
That was clear.
Oh.
But on the other side, you said regret but no guilt.
Yes.
No, that wasn't clear. What's the distinction there between regret and guilt?
You see, now, you do an action. Or rather, an action happens through this body, mind, organism, which you think is your action. And that action hurts somebody. Now, the action which you think is your action has hurt somebody produces regret, wouldn't it? I wish I hadn't hurt him.
Right.
That would be the reaction. I wish I hadn't hurt him. Regret arises. But in the case of the understanding, if the understanding has happened that what has hurt the other person was not your action, it was God's action and the destiny of this body, mind, organism, and getting hurt was the destiny of that body, mind, organism. If that understanding has been there, the regret would still happen. Regret being compassion for the one who is hurt. Compassion for the one who is hurt. But with the understanding that action which has hurt someone has hurt him because it was his destiny and not your action, guilt cannot arise. Why should you feel guilty if that action was not your action?
I see.
That an action which happened through this body, mind, organism hurt someone. It was the destiny of that body, mind, organism to be hurt. but it was not your action. Therefore, there is no need for guilt.
So,
Regret, compassion may arise, but not guilt.
so regret is the
Immediate reaction.
compassion.
Yes,
And
sure.
guilt would be beating yourself up about it.
The guilt
Yeah.
belongs to the me.
Right, I see.
The me says, I wish I hadn't done it. That is me feeling guilty. But if there is no me to own responsibility for that action, guilt cannot arise. Compassion may arise, but not guilt.
That's clear. Thank you.
I feel my body-mind organism is not too well programmed in this. But when you were answering the first question
Yes.
just now
Yeah.
about, there was a halfway through your answer,
Yes.
there was a moment when you said, I missed it, something like thought and witnessing, and then you said, but that's not it. And at that moment, Wayne went, ah. And I felt that, but I didn't get fully, the thought arises, and then you catch the thought, and is that witnessing or?
No, wait a minute. I think what you're really wanting to know is, what do I mean by witnessing? That's what you want to know. Witnessing as against observing. When I use the word witnessing, it is as against the word observing. In observing, there is an individual observer, the ego doer, who observes what is happening, you see, and feels pride or guilt in his doing it. In witnessing, there is no individual witnesser. Witnessing is impersonal, and witnessing is understanding in action. The understanding in action becomes impersonal witnessing, witnessing whatever is happening without judging it from the personal point of view. Without judging, this is good for me, that is bad for me. That is the individual observer observing and judging. The most beautiful example of impersonal witnessing is that of a baby, a contented baby. Contented baby who's had his milk, the diapers have been changed, and you watch a baby. It's really wonderful to be able to watch a baby, a contented baby. The eyes of the baby, it's not an idiot's look. An average baby, it watches intelligently, responds to what is. You talk to her nicely and the baby smiles. You frighten it, the baby cries. So it's not that the baby does not respond to what is happening. But what is not happening is, the baby does not say, so-and-so is a good man, he makes me smile. So-and-so is a bad man, he makes me cry. There is no judging. There is merely reaction to what is happening. So the baby reacts according to its programming, but does not judge as someone being good to her, someone being bad for her. So witnessing is always impersonal. There is no individual witnesser. Witnessing and judging. And witnessing, the impersonal witnessing, therefore, is what I call the understanding in action. When there is some understanding at any level, at some time, it goes into action as witnessing. Let me give you an example. If you go to a large hotel, sit in the big reception room, waiting for a friend who is still not expected for half an hour, then what happens? You see people arriving with their luggage on their way out. You see people coming in with luggage, going to the reception counter, registering. All this is activity. And that activity is witnessed. You see? And the personal observer comes in. When you suddenly see someone and you say, what a horrible looking person. Then the individual observer has come in and the impersonal witnessing has been cut off.
Seems like a silly question, but I have to ask it. What is the purpose of time?
I think the first time was all when you said what is, at that level.
You want me to ask it again?
Will you talk a little louder?
What is the purpose of time?
What is the
purpose of time?
Purpose of time.
What is the purpose of time? I see. You see, the purpose of time is to enable observation to happen. The mystic has been saying it for years, hundreds of years. The scientist has been saying for some time now that an object does not exist in manifestation unless it is observed. So, if the consciousness is at rest, if the energy is in its potential form, there is no manifestation. But when manifestation happens, space, the concept of space-time comes into existence. Manifestation means a three-dimensional object. So space is required in which the three-dimensional object can be extended. Space is necessary for a three-dimensional object to be extended in space. But that object will not exist unless it is observed. So if that object is extended and cut off, it won't be observed. So it is only in time that an object extended in space can be observed. So space-time is the basis, mechanical basis for the manifestation to happen. For objects to be extended in space and objects thus extended in space to be observed in time. So space-time is the necessary basis for manifestation and its functioning to happen.
Is that part of the divine hypnosis?
Indeed, it is part of the divine mechanics.
Does that change when the divine hypnosis goes?
You see, when divine hypnosis falls, is that what you mean? So, the hypnosis has been created by divine will, and in a few cases, that hypnosis is removed. But nothing changes as far as the manifestation and its functioning is concerned. When the hypnosis is removed, all that happens is the hypnosis was the sense of personal doership. I live my life. I produce the actions which happen. I am responsible for them. That sense of personal doership is the hypnosis. So when the hypnosis is removed, all that happens is that the sense of personal doership and responsibility is removed. That is all that happens.
But somehow I have the sense that the more I'm here listening to you, the more time collapses.
You will have to speak a little louder because
I have the sense that the more I'm here listening to you, the more time collapses.
the more you are listening to me,
the more time collapses.
the more time collection.
Collapses.
the more the sense of time collapses.
Yeah.
Yes, because the more of sense of time collapses, because time is thinking. As I told you, the lady, a thought comes, getting involved in it leads to horizontal thinking in time. So, when there is no horizontal thinking in time, time collapses. So, horizontal time is necessary for thinking to happen. When there is no thinking, there is no need of time. You see? Thinking needs horizontal time. And when no thinking happens, and there is acceptance of what is said in the moment, then you are in the moment. You don't need time. Because thinking is not happening. It is thinking which needs time. And when there is acceptance at the moment of what is said or felt, time is not necessary. You see?
Thank you.
Welcome.
As I understood, you say all is consciousness.
All is consciousness,
Yeah.
yes.
And the source.
I'm sorry?
The source.
The thought.
The source.
The source, yes. The source or consciousness or awareness or energy or God, whatever you call it, the source, yes.
And out of this source,
Yes.
there arises
The manifestation. Yes.
And
That is the first basic concept. That manifestation arises from the concept. And the Hindu scriptures give a beautiful simile. The simile is the source produces the manifestation from within itself without having to take recourse to any material outside of itself. Like a spider produces its web. The spider produces its web. In producing the web, the spider doesn't have to make use of any material outside of itself. You see, I think it's a very appropriate simile.
now my question is the source the same as the things that arise out of the source?
Yes.
Is this one? Or are there a separation or two things?
No. You see, it is consciousness at rest. In movement, it becomes consciousness in movement. So consciousness at rest and consciousness and movement are not two.
Are the same.
You see? Now you sitting and you standing or you sleeping are not three persons. You see? Three aspects of the same thing. But still, consciousness at rest and consciousness in movement is the same thing. Which is what Buddha meant when he said, samsara and nirvana are one. He said, samsara is nirvana, nirvana is samsara. Nirvana being consciousness at rest, samsara being consciousness in movement. So he says, consciousness at rest is consciousness in movement. Consciousness in movement is consciousness at rest. He called it nirvana and samsara.
Thank you.
Not at all.
I have a question about decision making.
Yes.
So, even though
the person you really want is my son. Anyway,
Maybe.
let me try.
So even though I understand that free will is counterfeit,
Yes.
and when you look back on decisions,
Yes.
it's easy to say, yes, that was that decision happened, and I understand that there was many things that happened around making that decision.
Yes.
Still, in the moment of decision,
Yes.
it feels like I have to become, I don't know how to make a decision, staying in, there's no decision to make, it's already made. It feels like I have to make a decision.
That is correct. That is correct. You still have to make a decision with the total acceptance that you have no control over the consequences of that decision. That is, you make a decision as if it is your decision, as if you are responsible for the decision, with the total acceptance that what happens is not in your control. You still have to make a decision.
It doesn't seem to help, though.
Pardon?
So it doesn't seem to help something.
No, it doesn't.
No.
You see, if somebody says, my friend makes quick decisions, I'm not able to make quick decisions. How do I make quick decisions? He can't be helped. If his programming is such that he finds it difficult to make a decision, decisions will be difficult. Some are quick to make, I told you. So my son is programmed to make quick decisions. Someone else is not. And there has to be acceptance that I'm not. See now, this body-mind organism is not programmed to be brave. This is programmed to be, say, let us say, rather timid. So the involvement happens if I think someone must help me to become brave. And I say, whom do I go to be brave? That is involvement. Or I can say, all right, this body is programmed to be timid. I can say this body is programmed to be maybe 5'2", 5'3", to weigh at best 138 pounds. Now probably 108 pounds. That the mind intellect is ready to accept. The physical limitation, the mind intellect is ready to accept. The mind intellect is also able to accept the limitations of its intellect. An average person would say, he will accept that he cannot be an Einstein. Just as I have to accept that I cannot be an Albert Schwarzenegger. 6 feet 3 inches, 240 pounds. That I accept. I also accept that I cannot be an Einstein. But it is very difficult to accept that I am a timid person. That's why the unhappiness. So if a person is able to accept his programmed as it is, the program as it is, including physical, mental and temperamental characteristics, then there is that much less unhappiness. Because there is no acceptance of the deficiencies of the temperament, that unhappiness arises.
Ramesh, I'd just like to share this with you as a result of your talk yesterday and then listening to Mark in the afternoon and meeting with Elke. And I saw there yesterday that there was a book of yours with a tiger on, and it's for sale. And it's underneath a picture of a tiger.
Yes.
And that reminded me of the expression that Ramana uses, that you often repeat, your head is in the tiger's mouth.
That is the title of the book.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
That is the title of the book.
But I saw the books down there without going to them, and I saw the picture of the tiger. They put it in a very nice place, the book. just below the painting of a tiger.
I see.
So this all went into the mind together with what you said yesterday.
Yes.
And the talk that Mark gave in my meeting with Elke. And then last night, I had this very strange dream. I was being chased by a tiger. And not only that, but it caught me and ate me. And I woke up and I thought, this is it. At long last, what Ramana said is right. I'm enlightened.
Quite right. So let us take it as a good portent, as a good omen.
Yeah. I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
Because it was so strange after the whole day's
I
event.
hope it will happen.
Thank you.
I hope the tiger is hungry enough. Yeah.
Ramesh, I don't want to leave it to the last minute. Since last week already, I need to thank you for having endured the long journey and have come again this year and make this all possible, the gathering and the being together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You know, my wife is not totally sorry that I go. Because when I'm away, she gets the house painted and repaired without giving any inconvenience to me.
I would like to ask about Kosovo and the source. The Yugoslavian situation.
Yes.
And the source.
And the source. All right. Shall we talk about Hitler and the source?
No.
You see, Hitlers have been happening, Molotov, they have been happening, everything has been happening. You see, do you think Hitler would have been there if it were not God's will? So wars have to happen. War and peace are the interconnected polaric opposites which have been there since, I would imagine, time began. You see? So, happening of Hitler was God's will. But I read somewhere an account which you will find interesting. The account is this. After Hitler had taken over the entire Western Europe, what I read was he stood on the shores of France, looking on the shores of England. He had to make a decision whether or not to invade England. And that decision of one man could have affected millions. So, the decision that he made was based on the destiny of the millions. The story goes, or the report goes, that Hitler stood there on the shores of France for hours. He had already asked his generals, consulted his generals. In most instances, the generals had some difference of opinion. But in this case, should he or should he not invade England? There was no difference. Every single general agreed that England should be invaded at once. And they promised Hitler they would bring England down to its knees in 5 days. That was what Hitler was promised by all his generals. And yet, ultimately, the decision he took was not to invade England, but to turn back and invade Russia. So, the same source who created Hitler also created the decision in Hitler's mind to go back to his ruin.
Yes, I understand that.
Yes.
So therefore, Kosovo is designed by the source?
As part of the functioning of manifestation at the present time, yes.
Right, thank you. That's what I wanted to
Oh,
know.
yes.
Thank you.
It is part of the functioning of manifestation at the present time. And no power on earth could have avoided it. You want to? No, I thought someone had raised their arm. Ah, there it is.
I understood that decision making is so important and it's different from the doership. I just wonder, the limitations of our programming are there, but there's also this kind of environmental conditioning, and how do I differentiate between the two? And what happens to the conditioning in enlightenment?
Conditioning is programming. Now, what happens to the conditioning in the case of a sage where enlightenment has happened? The programming and the early conditioning remain more or less the same. If a sage has been programmed for anger to arise quickly, anger will continue to arise quickly even after self-realization. If compassion arises in a body-mind organism more quickly than others because of the programming, same thing will continue to happen. So that in a case where there is enlightenment has happened, in the case of a sage, let us say, anger could arise 1 split second, and the next split second, compassion could arise. In other words, the anger which arises is not carried forward horizontally in time. It's in the moment and that's finished. And in that moment, the anger could take any course. So could the compassion. You see? And this compassion or generosity is not necessarily a good thing. Generosity is a good thing if you can afford to be generous. But if you cannot afford, and you are generous, then it can be a calamity. My son-in-law is programmed that way, to be generous. What he did once was, they have a farm where there are many poor workers. So one of the workers, a woman worker came, pressed the bell. My daughter wasn't there then. So my son-in-law went and saw this woman in ragged clothes. Her sari was torn, you see. So he dealt with the problem she had. Then, seeing her, he says, wait a minute. He went in, opened my daughter's cupboard, took out the first good sari that he could find, and gave it to her. And my daughter was mad as all. You see? Now that was another thing that happened was, he has a tendency towards cold. And once he gets a cold, it lasts for a long time. That is part of the programming. And once he was coming home, the car stopped at a traffic signal. And there was a beggar drenched to the skin. You see? And the son-in-law of mine literally gave his coat off his back to him. Came home, drenched to the skin, caught a cold, you see, and then said, I was a fool to give the coat to my... By giving the coat to... Now I am suffering cold. But The arising of the compassion, and the compassion turning into the generosity of taking off his coat and giving, something beyond his control. That's part of the programming. But because the understanding was not there, he said I was a fool to be so generous.
Yesterday you referred to the DNA, and this morning to your height and weight. So I felt that there was a difference between kind of genetical programming and the programming you gave to your son when you helped him to learn about decisions.
No, that was his destiny. To be given a lesson without me wanting to. So, you see, programming according to my concept, I repeat, according to my concept, is something connected with the body-mind organism. The unique DNA plus the environmental conditioning. But what happens to that programmed object during its span of life, every moment, is God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. What happens to a human being, human object, during its allotted span of life is the destiny of that body-mind organ, or the will of God.
So it seems to me that it is my ego trying to differentiate and doing something about the conditioning. Thank you very much.
Not at all. You're most welcome. Yes.
When you talk to a body-mind organism and tell him, let God do its job, doesn't this imply a kind of mechanism in that body-mind organism that has a choice between letting God do its job and
yes.
making an own effort?
Yes. You see, let God do its job. But the very basic understanding is, which I keep repeating as often as I can, that is not in your control. I keep repeating as often as but now it seems I don't repeat it often enough. That is the basic point. Question? Well, if there are no questions, could we have but wait a minute, we'll make it the last question.
I couldn't follow intellectually what you said yesterday, and I couldn't understand it. The only thing I understood was, what was it? That I don't have to understand it anyway, because either I'm programmed to understand it, and then I will understand it at the appropriate time, or I'm not, and then why would I bother? Did you get that? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
She said that what she understood yesterday was that she doesn't have to understand. That understanding will happen when it has to happen.
That is absolutely correct. So you can relax and let the understanding happen or not happen. Who cares?
Who cares? Good. Thank you.